During the history of Memphis wrestling, it was reported that Randy Savage beat up Bill Dundee after Savage heard that Dundee had a gun and wanted to shoot him. Is that true? And can you elaborate on the story? Any other good stories about the beef between the Poffos and the Memphis office?
Only there are some basic nuggets of truth in there somewhere, obfuscated by a complete mistelling of the story. So would you like me to say what actually happened?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, here's the deal. Randy Savage and, of course, his brother Lanny and their father Angelo Poffo had started ICW, International Championship Wrestling, and they were occupying the area of the old Phil Golden's All-Star Wrestling promotion that's detailed in my book, Tuesday Night at the Gardens, Pro Wrestling in Louisville. It talks about that outlaw promotion in 72 and 73 that went from Southern Illinois and the Paducah, Kentucky area in a band of towns through Louisville and Lexington and Eastern Kentucky and into West Virginia. Angelo Poffo had, when that promotion was failing, had because he was from Chicago, and of course, and the Southern Illinois area was attractive to him. He had either bought in or somehow acquired an interest in Phil Golden's All-Star Wrestling, trying to keep it going back in 72, 73, and it hadn't worked. So he had his eye on that territory and started ICW several years later in the late 70s. And then when the guys like Bob Orton Jr. and Bob Roop and Ronnie Garvin and Malenko broke off from Southeastern in Knoxville and started All-Star Wrestling in East Tennessee, they kind of joined up with the ICW folks. And basically from Paducah, Kentucky, across through Louisville and Lexington and into Eastern Kentucky was the ICW territory. And that was in opposition, as it had been in the early 70s with Phil Golden, to Jerry Jarrett's Memphis group. So now we have the territory. Well, basically, Jerry Jarrett was doing real good business, and ICW had struggled, although they did, I mean, when we say they didn't do very good business, they were doing 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 people sometimes in some of those Eastern Kentucky towns where there wasn't a lot of wrestling, and that would be considered good today, but for the time, they were a very struggling company. And they were always cutting promos on Jarrett's guys, Lawler and Bill Dundee and Jerry Jarrett himself and Tojo, and always challenging them. And if they'd show up, we'll give $10,000 to a ham sandwich if Jerry Lawler shows up and faces Randy Savage or whatever the case. And so they were always talking on their TV show, and Jarrett's guys on the TV and elsewhere just ignored them. Well, anyway, Randy Savage got word at one point somebody had made Bill Dundee some trunks that said Macho Man on the back, because Dundee always had something on the back ass of his tights like Superstar or, Macho Man or whatever the case. Handsome Jimmy did it a lot too. It was just something the guys did in the 70s in wrestling, have sayings on the back of their tights. Well, Randy Savage obviously was Macho Man Randy Savage, and he took high offense to Dundee having Macho Man on the ass of his trunks. I'm not making this shit up, guys. This is the truth. So basically, since everybody lived in Nashville that worked for Jarrett, and the Poffos, sometimes came through Nashville, the way I heard it was that they had Candy Devine, the girl wrestler who lived in Nashville, and she was kind of neutral, but I think she was dating one of the ICW guys. She gave them the word when Dundee had shown up at the gym in Hendersonville where all the guys worked out. And Savage, and I think Pez Whatley was with him, and a couple guys pulled up, and as Dundee's coming out of the gym, Savage comes out of the car in the fucking parking lot and is cutting a promo, and Savage talked much like he did on TV in person, and especially if he was mad. And we've told the story on the program before with Dutch Mantell about the Waffle House incident where he beat up the cowboy that just got married and then went 2 out of 3 with the police dog and everything. So anyway, Savage starts cutting a promo on Dundee. Dundee sees he's outnumbered, and he tries to diffuse the situation by saying something like, hey, let's just hold on. Let me put my bag in the trunk. Well, what he's doing is he's getting his trunk out where he got his fucking gun out, because he was, as I've mentioned, outnumbered in the parking lot. And who knows with Randy Savage what he's going to do. So basically, the story, and Dundee could probably tell it better, but either Dundee managed to get a hold of his gun and bring it out, but Savage blocked it, grabbed the gun, and whacked him with it, or Savage had something in his hand. But one way or another, Savage drilled Dundee on the side of the head and broke his jaw. There wasn't a big beat up fight. It was the shot. And I'm sure people noticed that things were going on. How could you not notice Randy Savage and Bill Dundee having a fucking fight in the parking lot, broad daylight of a gym? So there was a bunch of screaming and yelling. Dundee got nailed and the jaw got broken, and they took off. The perpetrators, Savage and them. So Dundee had to take some time off of wrestling which cost him some money. So there was definitely some heat there. Because I think he had to have something. They went into his ear or something and rewired the jaw or whatever. But he had to take a week or two off, and that was the parking lot incident. And there was like the ICW guys would come to Rupp Arena in Lexington, which was really their best town. That was kind of their base, and they would buy tickets to the Jarrett shows, and they'd either be in the back. When the guys came up, when they'd park and walk in the back door, they'd be there, yelling at them and challenge them in front of the fans. Or they would sit at ringside a time or two in Rupp Arena when they were allowed to buy tickets for. They put a stop to that and stand up and try to challenge guys. And Jarrett had told everybody to completely ignore them, but all the guys were bringing their guns because they didn't know what was going to happen out in the parking lot, especially after the thing with Dundee. So there was some heightened tensions. That's back in the old days when people knew how to have a fucking promotional war instead of this goddamn, I'll go pull your fucking posters down because I'm mad at you type of promotional war that they have at the outlaw shows these days. But it was quite tense for a while. But that's why that Lawler and Savage set some gate records when ICW finally folded up and Angelo called to see if he could get his sons a job with Jarrett. And of course, Jarrett saw, well, they've been selling the match between Savage and Lawler for the past 7 years. So we'll go ahead and have it. And I think they did like fucking 8,000 people in Lexington or whatever for that. So it all worked out in the end, except Dundee never got his receipt for that fucking broken jaw.
They challenged Dundee and Lawler and Tojo and all these guys on TV. No one challenged Billy Robinson, I noticed.
They did not do that. Nobody ever mentioned Billy Robinson's name.
I know he was there around that same time. No one ever said, I'll give you $10,000, Billy, if you could beat me up. Yeah.
Show up and Billy bring a ham sandwich. I'll put up $10,000. Those words were not uttered.
You mentioned Candy Devine. Was she a fan before she got into the business? Was she involved with the WFIA and all that?
Yes. She is in the famous picture of all of us wearing our wrestling T-shirts. That was taken in Memphis in '79. She was wearing, goddamn, whose was she wearing? She was president for a while of Leaping Lanny's fan club, I believe. Candace Runnell.
Huh.
So.
Wow. I noticed also in that picture is Andy Dragos, who at Smoky Mountain Wrestling Fan Week was a good guy, passed away, but his best friend at Fan Week was Marty Gorman, and he was drunk the entire time, 2 years in a row, just bombed the entire time. Yes.
And Mike O'Hara was in that picture, and Elnora Gaddy from Evansville with it, and her, with all the whole family with the Bill Dundee T-shirts, and me wearing Lawler, and et cetera, et cetera. But Candy Devine.
Walt Wolanski
was in there.
One of the pioneers of tape trading, I guess you could say.
I have many of the tapes that I have today came from Walt Wolanski.
Well, there you go. That was a fun question. I do like the visual of Randy and Pez and Candy Devine and whoever else running in a gym parking lot away from the scene so they don't get arrested. Yeah. It's like what a ragtag crew.
And by the way, to answer the follow-up question before it gets thrown in, yes, of course Dundee could have pressed charges, but then it would have made the papers, and then that would put unnecessary, bad publicity and potentially an expose of the business on wrestling that they didn't need. So that, those things were handled those days. And I'm sure he probably thought that at some point, he would find Randy again, but he didn't know it'd be when he was working for Jarrett and he couldn't do anything about it.
We actually just recently talked about this on a super podcast because when Dundee returned on Memphis TV, Lance interviewed him and they talked about it without mentioning Randy Savage or ICW. They just said, Billy, you've been gone. What happened? And he said, I was in a parking lot. All these big guys attacked me. And so, it was brought up on Memphis TV that there had been some sort of incident.
Yeah, but you didn't involve the authorities in those days. And most of the time in inter wrestling conflicts because it was like if one of the mafia bosses got whacked by the other mafia boss, did the rest of the crew call the cops and say, hey, they killed our boss? No, they took care of it in their own time and their own way. And it just it ended up never Bill never got the payback on that.